Disappointment is unmet expectations. And the more significant the expectations, the more significant the disappointment.
You're listening to the Connected Parenting Minute with Will and CarrieAnn Standfest. This podcast is a conversation about parenting, using connection first, trauma-informed principles. Because when you lead with connection, everyone feels seen, which is the foundation to a more peaceful home. This podcast reminds you that you don't have to be a perfect parent, but we can all get a little better, one connected parenting minute at a time.
Hello and welcome back to the Connected Parenting Minute podcast. My name is Will Standfest, and as always, I am joined by the lovely CarrieAnn Standfest.
Hey, everybody. We're so glad to be here.
We are so glad to be here. We're glad that you can take a few minutes out of your day and join us for this fantastic episode.
It feels a little weird because we're recording and it's light outside. So we're hoping that all of our children will be quiet enough that we can get through this episode.
So you'll have to forgive us if there's a little bit of noise in the background. I'm going to do my best to edit it out, make it sound all good. But we're not in a recording studio. We're actually recording in our house. And when you have 8 children...
Plus a friend.
Oh, plus a friend.
There's a friend here today.
Sometimes things don't go as you expect.
Exactly. Oh, that is a really great segue into our episode tonight. Although I do want to say that we're really excited because we'll share next episode an interview we did with someone at the Planted Conference.
It is a really good interview with
Sandra Flack.
It was fantastic. However, coming up next here in all of our lives are the dreaded holidays.
Not dreaded. They're fun. Says the woman who has not done any Christmas shopping and swore she would have it done by Thanksgiving, which might or might not be tomorrow.
Yeah. No, it's the day after tomorrow. You got plenty of time. You can do all your Christmas shopping tomorrow.
Oh my goodness gracious. But we're going to talk about the holidays.
The holidays are starting. And if we're all honest with ourselves, the holidays can be a lot with kiddos, right? And so we wanted to take a few minutes on this week's episode and talk about expectations.
That's such a good topic. And I'm so excited to unpack this a little bit with you.
Well, without further ado, let's dive in.
Awesome. So when things don't go as planned, because that may happen once in a while.
You mean when we have all of the holiday plans with all of the people that things aren't going to go exactly the way we want them to?
That may or may not be the case. I don't know about you, but I've never had that happen. So
I've only been on this earth for 45 years. I've got another 40 for it to happen, right?
Exactly. Practice makes perfect, right? All right, let's get to point number 1. Point number 1 being that we need to recognize our expectations.
We need to recognize our expectations. Say more about that, hon.
When we go into specific times of the year, we often may or may not feel disappointed when things don't go as planned, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things I think we don't actually do is take the time to recognize what our expectations are.
Mm-hmm.
As a result, we're disappointed, we feel down, all these pieces that we're not really clarifying and understanding. And my encouragement to our listeners is to really take the time to recognize what those expectations are.
That's really good. Yeah, because if you can't do anything with your expectations if you don't say them out loud or communicate with your spouse or your kiddos about what the expectations are, what you're hoping for or what you're planning for the holidays. If those things aren't openly discussed, you're kind of setting yourself up for disappointment.
Exactly. And I think you have a really great quote that when we were talking about and we're trying to figure out who said that quote, but why don't you share?
I looked up Brene Brown in Rising Strong said, disappointment is unmet expectations. And the more significant the expectations, the more significant the disappointment. Let me say that again. Disappointment is unmet expectations. And the more significant the expectations, the more significant the disappointment.
Right? I can't tell you how many times around the holidays, around certain situations where I was disappointed and I really couldn't even articulate why. But it comes to clarification in that aspect of sharing and talking about and figuring out what my expectations even are. So we want to take a couple of different scenarios and talk about what expectations we may or may not have had in certain situations. And then we're going to kind of go into that with point number 2 as well. But in our nuclear family, in our biological family, growing up, we had a couple of different expectations for Thanksgiving. You want to share a little bit about that?
And so for all the parents out there, you were all a young married couple at one point in time. This is like the fundamental thing, right? You each came from your family of origin. You each had your own traditions, your own expectations. And then those first set of holidays can be kind of awkward sometimes because especially if you haven't talked about it ahead of time or recognized your expectations for the holidays, all of a sudden you have a pile of competing expectations around the holidays. For example, I grew up in Detroit, and whether you know it or not, Detroit Lions play on Thanksgiving every year.
Every year,
like for as long as I've been alive and probably longer, they have the Thanksgiving Day game on Thursday afternoon, and it's a big deal for Detroit Lions fans. And quite honestly, in my house, Thanksgiving dinner revolved around when the Lions game was over. It was basically, well, once we finish the Lions game, then we'll start eating.
That was not exactly how my family worked. My family is also from Detroit, but definitely not die-hard football fans. In fact, I don't think I even remember a single Sunday where we had football on. But we always watched the Thanksgiving Day parade in New York City.
The Macy's Day Parade.
Yeah, the Macy's Day Parade.
Yep.
We did that when my dad prepared the turkey and a lot of the side dishes. And we ate at like 1 or 2 o'clock. Always.
Which is a problem when the Lions game kickoff is like noon.
As you can see, there might have been a little bit of, which one do we do?
And to clarify, my dad never cooked, like ever. I don't know that I've ever remember him cooking other than occasionally throwing burgers on the grill. And so like there's some very
there was
different
a gap.
There was a gap of expectations around Thanksgiving there.
So those are, the expectations that, we came into our relationship with. Now, we're also going to tie this into hosting, because I think we shared on the podcast before that we did international orphan hosting a couple of years. And that was another scenario where around the holidays or while the kids were with us, there were some expectations there. I remember a particular time, I think it was around the 4th of July holiday, and we went to visit my parents, and we had a bunch of fun with extended family, cousins. And there was a particular situation where we were doing something all as a group.
Yep.
And we had a kid that had come from a different country, was there. I think she was overwhelmed and she was just done. And she just flat out refused to do what everybody else was doing. And that really did not meet my expectations, because this was my family. I really wanted to do this together. And it was hard because I didn't understand. I mean, there was a language barrier. There's all these different aspects of it. But my expectation was we were going to do this. And that was not her expectation. And so there was a gap.
There's a gap, and that gap was the disappointment.
It was. There was a huge disappointment in that aspect.
Well, disappointment or frustration even, right?
Yeah, I might have been a little bit more frustrated than I'd like to admit. But, there's a difference. There's what she thought and what I thought.
Yeah.
And then going into the aspect of fostering or adopting, we have the expectations that our kids have and that come to live with us.
There's our expectations, right?
And then
especially if we already have bio kiddos in the home.
Or kids that have been with us for a long time.
Like we've kind of established, well, this is what we do over Thanksgiving and whatever. And I think a lot of us, without necessarily saying it out loud, expect new kiddos to our home to kind of just go with the flow and kind of just do what we do.
Yeah, exactly. And that isn't always the case.
Yeah, especially in a fostering situation where it's easy to forget that these kids have a history, right? They have a whole other relationship, a whole other family that they've lived with. Some of them for years and years, depending on what age they come into your home, and to expect them to just
do whatever it is that you're doing. There's a gap between the two expectations.
Right, because they have their own expectations of what family was like, what the holidays were like in their home, and they're the children. They are even less likely to be able to identify and verbalize,
communicate exactly
those expectations as we are, and it's our responsibility as the adults in this situation to say this kid probably has expectations around the holidays that are different than mine. I should do a little bit of work ahead of time and try to figure out what things that we could incorporate that are part of their life that would help them feel seen and safe and meet some of their expectations while acknowledging my own and meeting some of them.
Exactly. So point number 1 is recognize our expectations.
Before we go to point number 2, here's a quick break.
We've had such a great fall traveling and speaking at conferences. We're excited to announce our first conference of 2025. Join us at the Conference in Kansas City, February 21st through 22nd, again in 2025. Join us for real encouragement for foster and adoptive parents. Registration can be found at realencouragement.org. That's realencouragement.org. And if you're interested in having us speak at your event, contact us at info@connectedparentingminute.com. We'd be happy to work with you.
And now back to the show.
All right, on to point number 2. Well, first we have recognize our expectations. And then point number 2 is clarify our expectations.
Clarify our expectations. Okay. Say more about that.
All right, when we're able to recognize what our expectations are and then take a moment to really figure out what expectations are important and how we sift through those.
Okay, kind of valuing or evaluating what are the most important and what are kind of the secondary nice to have expectations.
Right. For a parent, we might have this vision of Thanksgiving dinner with all the trimmings and everyone sitting nicely and, you know, saying what they're thankful for and
the
how
football game on in the background.
Great. We're going to get to that one. And how great the family is and all these good things. But when I say clarify our own expectations, we have to go through that and go, well, what is really the important part of that? Mm-hmm. Is it eating the meal? Because it may look like a child bouncing up and down out of their seat for the entirety of the meal. It may look like someone going, ew, this is gross. And then you gently reminding them and saying, you can say it's not my favorite. It could look like someone genuinely not being thankful at that moment.
Yeah.
And just being angry about it, you know. Again, kids that are not born to us, kids that are visiting, kids are, you know, even family members that are extended coming
cousins
back into the family, you know, there's a whole gamut. So clarifying what is important to you can help you meet those expectations in a realistic way. Because to be honest, we can't have all of the things.
We can't.
But if eating the meal together is the really, really, really most important part, you set a timer for 15 minutes and say go.
Mm-hmm.
Or if figuring out what you're thankful for and sharing that, it may come in a different way.
Right. Maybe it's not sitting around the table because there's food sitting in front of the children and there's dinner rolls. You don't understand. There's rolls and there's butter and there's gravy. What? How can you expect a kid to sit still when there's rolls in front of them?
Oh my gosh, that's such a thing. I think we have to get more rolls, by the way.
Yeah. That's as soon as I said that, I'm like, we probably don't have enough rolls.
No. All right. We digress. But clarifying what those expectations are really important.
Right. Because you clarify which ones are most important to you. And also, I think that comes with that is clarifying what's realistic based on who's in your home.
Exactly.
Because it could be aunts, it could be uncles, it could be grandparents, it could be cousins, it could be host kiddos, it could be foster kiddos, it could be adopted kiddos. And each one of those comes with different expectations and different pieces of what you're hoping is going to happen that is realistic and it might not be realistic. I mean, it could be as simple as the baby needs a nap or the toddler is overstimulated or is not hungry at 3:00 in the afternoon when the food's ready.
Right. It also gives us the opportunity to go, oh, this part is really important to me. I can convey that to everyone else so they know what the expectation is.
There you go.
Because not relaying that really does set us up for disappointment.
It absolutely does.
You know, at least we can say, well, everybody knew and that wasn't as important to everybody else and that's okay. But at least I made my voice heard and known, especially as the parent.
And one key piece while we were talking about this that I liked was this concept of if there's a way we can, once we've kind of recognized our expectations and we've clarified them, can we turn them into hopes? Or turn them into dreams or desires? Because there's something inherent for me in the word expectation where you're inherently thinking that it might not be met.
Okay.
Or there's inherent, like Brene, the quote said, there's inherently disappointment when an expectation is not met.
Exactly.
And so there can be a little bit of disappointment when I hope that we're able to do this. I hope that we're able to make this work. And yet, if I expect it to happen, I can be disappointed. If I hope that it happens, I'm like, I feel like I'm more like let down. Like, well, I was hoping this was going to happen, but it didn't work. So that's okay. Just finding a way to hold it loosely.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when it includes a gamut of other people.
Yeah.
But there is the aspect if you're like, well, clarifying, I really, really, really want to watch It's a Wonderful Life. And I want to do it with the family, but that doesn't work out. You go, okay, well, this is really important to me. I can do it another time. I can do it with my spouse. I can do it with my best friend. I can do it with one child. And recognizing, because we're not saying don't have things that you like to do or that are important to you and ignore those. What we're saying is just looking at the whole picture. So that way we're not the ones, because quite frankly, when mom gets upset and bent out of shape, it's really hard for everybody else. It's just a dynamic that gets difficult if we're being completely honest.
Yeah.
And so being honest with yourself about what expectations are, why they're important, those types of things can help maybe make that a little easier as we go.
Absolutely.
Right. I wanted to get back a little bit when we talked about, the aspect of, so clarifying our expectations, but in the context of when we first got married and we had different expectations for the 4th of July, for Thanksgiving, what did that look like? What did we end up doing?
I think what we ended up doing is I felt like football was important to me. And I decided when we ate didn't really matter to me nearly as much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what we ended up doing is we ended up turning Thanksgiving into more of a kind of early lunchtime thing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not early lunchtime, but a lunchtime meal so we could eat before the football game started, or when it didn't work, like timing wise, because, cooking turkey.
Because cooking turkey is hard.
It is. When it didn't work, it was more of like, well, we'll start the game. And when food's ready, we have the technology to pause TV nowadays.
Right. That didn't exist before.
And so we would pause the game and go eat and enjoy the time. And then after dinner, we can go back to the game, or the Lions are losing bad enough that I don't care anymore. Not this year.
There is that.
Not this year. Shout out to all the Lions fans. Let's go.
All right. So what I hear you say is we made compromises.
We clarified what was important to us, and we worked together to make the thing that was important to you and the thing that was important to me work together.
Yeah, that's right. And then in our hosting situation where we had a kiddo that didn't want to do what everybody else did, after my initial disappointment and frustration and stuff, I recognized that this child was here for a short time. I could continue to invest in relationships with my family in other ways. And at that time, I could invest in her by just staying with her and being with her. But I had to be able to clarify, well, what's important to me? It's spending time with my family. And how do I make that happen? Well, it can't happen right now because I've got to manage and care for the person in front of me. I can clarify by saying, well, later I'm going to spend extra time connecting with my family.
In a different way. Yeah. Well, and even clarifying our expectations. If you're in a period of hosting children and you're hoping to have a good connection and have a good relationship with them, then maybe that's more important than Christmas or Thanksgiving going exactly how it's gone for you in years past.
Mm-hmm.
And clarifying that this short time relationship with this host kiddo is really important to me and I want to make it the best that I can may mean that the perfect holidays come second to that.
Exactly. That it's just this moment.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And then, with fostering and with adoption, looking at it differently of really setting the tone that our children's families are also part of our families.
Yeah. Our family has expanded not just by the 1 or 2 or 3 kiddos we are fostering or adopting.
Mm-hmm.
It's expanded to include their extended family as well.
Exactly. And that's going to look different in every situation, but having an open heart and mind to that of how do we make that possible, because nothing says I love you to a kid quite as much as saying I love the people that you love.
And the things that are important to you
are important to me.
Absolutely.
All right. So point number 2 is clarify our expectations. And that brings us to point number 3, which is my favorite. It's create a backup plan.
Create a backup plan.
It could be plan B, plan C, plan D.
There are lots of letters you can use.
There are lots of letters, 26, I think.
Specifically.
But really taking into account that you can have your ultimate goal, your dream holiday, but then really what at the bare bones does it look like? You know, you burn Thanksgiving dinner. Maybe you don't have power that day.
Ooh.
Maybe that's definitely no Lions game. Maybe you can get it on the radio. All right, I digress.
What's a radio? I'm not that young. I know what a radio is.
But having a backup plan that you can be okay with is important.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on it a little bit of if watching A Wonderful Life is really important to you around the holidays and it doesn't happen on Thanksgiving Day or the day after when you were originally hoping, what's the backup plan? Well, maybe me and my wife go back to our bedroom and we put the kids to bed half an hour early and we watch that ourselves.
Exactly. So taking into account what's important and how do we make that happen in a different way? Actually, we have a great story with that. I was thinking about the Thanksgiving where we moved.
Oh, yeah. Speaking about expectations around Thanksgiving.
What was that? Was it like 9 years ago? I think it was 9 years ago because it was the move to our last house.
Something like that.
Well, here's the setup. We're moving into a new house. We just purchased, very excited about it. I don't remember how many kids we had at that point. 5. Yeah, it must have been. And we may or may not have forgotten that Thanksgiving fell right in that time.
There's a lot going on when you're moving houses with 5 children.
Yeah, that would be accurate. So we're moving our family, but everything's in boxes, all these pieces, a bazillion trips, trying to clean everything up, have the old house, there's closing issues, all these things, right? And so we forgot that it was Thanksgiving.
I don't know if we forgot it was Thanksgiving. We forgot to prepare for Thanksgiving.
I think I forgot.
Okay.
To be completely honest. Well, one of our children was really looking forward to Thanksgiving dinner. And at the last minute, we were just like, oh, but I don't think he actually said this.
He didn't say anything.
And we ended up going, you know what? People do like Chinese food for Thanksgiving all the time. Like that's a thing, right? Maybe it's more Christmas. I don't know. I confuse my holiday movies. And so we said, you know what? We're just going to get frozen Chinese food and cook that, right?
Yeah.
Great.
So I think
First
I went to like
meal.
I went to like Target or something and like got the orange chicken and the fried rice and like whatever they had in the freezer section because we just didn't have the time or the bandwidth to cook a turkey and to mash potatoes and to do all the things. And the two of us were like, hey, this is an adventure. It'll be fun. Whatever.
This child may or may not have been completely crushed.
Like his soul was crushed for how disappointed he was.
I want to say he may have shed some tears over it. Like it was a pretty big deal.
Yes.
And there were many years after that where, do you remember this? He used to be like, now remember Thanksgiving? Remember that one time?
Thanksgiving is next week, Mom and Dad. Are you ready?
Are you ready?
We don't want to have what happened last time happen again.
It was pretty intense. Like, and now we look back on it and laugh, but it was really funny. But he had an expectation, and granted, he was a kid, and so it doesn't fall anywhere near his fault. But it just highlights the fact that when we have expectations and they aren't met, that it can be very crushing, especially if you have really high expectations.
Right, and even from us as parents reflecting back on that, we probably could have had a conversation with him. And been like, hey, bud, listen, Mom and I let's just go to the store. Why don't you pick out something you'd really enjoy for Thanksgiving? Like I could have tied the kids in a little bit more,
right?
Maybe in retrospect or something like that would have helped mitigate some of the expectations. That wouldn't mean they wouldn't have been disappointed, but maybe not like soul crushingly disappointed.
Yeah, that was pretty intense. It was just, it is a good example, but it's also, we tend to think and just go, oh, well, we're just going to do this. We're just going to change that. And our kids do have expectations too.
And our kids' expectations are just as valid as ours.
Yep, they are. They are.
And so creating a backup plan,
because every season's going to be different too. I just want to tie that in really quickly because we may be in a season where we have an infant. We might be in a season where we have 5 teenagers. We might be in a season where extended family member comes and crashes your house for a week and has a bazillion kids with them. There are different seasons and that's okay. And just looking at that and be like, oh, this one's going to be different because it can be a shared memory, especially when you experience something different out of the ordinary together as a family. that really is the heart of connection, is our shared experiences.
Absolutely. I mean, you think of how many crazy stories from growing up that have become just the family thing that you laugh about or talk about at the holidays and when you're remembering good memories. Heck, the Chinese food for holidays is now kind of a running gag in our home. In fact, I think we are planning to do Chinese food for Christmas dinner this year.
Oh, that's right.
Just because now it's a thing
It is
that we
a
all
thing.
laugh about. But it's a story. It's a shared story that kind of builds connection, and it's kind of an inside joke and something fun for our family to connect around.
No.
So remember, your plan B, C, or D could be the thing that becomes a lasting memory.
Exactly. Oh, I love that so much. All right. We should probably wrap up this episode, but I just want to touch on those 3 points again really quickly. Point number 1 being recognize our expectations. Point number 2, clarify our expectations. Nobody is going to read your mind. So being able to figure out what's important and relaying that to the people in your life, your family, extended family members, can help mitigate some of that disappointment if things don't go the way that we are hoping they go, but we didn't actually say. And then point number 3 is create a backup plan, because shared experiences are the heart of connection.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of your day and listening to the podcast. I hope that this is giving you some encouragement, some value, some things to think about heading into the holiday season so that you can manage your expectations and not end up with a whole world of disappointment and frustration, because we all know that it happens. If you've enjoyed or gotten value from this episode, please jump over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, and tell your friends about the episode. Sharing this podcast far and wide is one of the best ways you can help us grow and help other parents out there that might be struggling just like you. So before we go, we just want to remind you,
You don't have to be a perfect parent,
but we can all get a little bit better, one connected parenting minute at a time.
Thank you for listening to my mom and dad's podcast. Make sure you put a like and subscribe. If you like this episode, tell all of your friends about it. See you next time.
For more parenting tips or to connect with us, check out the Connected Parenting Minute on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Or you can send us an email using connectedparentingminute@gmail.com.